We come to you with breaking news now. Just moments ago, missiles have been launched from Iran into Israel. The IDF says dozens of missiles have been intercepted by its Iron Dome defense system. It's unclear how many. Iran has claimed responsibility for the attack, saying in a statement, quote, "If Israel responds militarily to this operation, it will face a harsher response." I want to bring in now Gerard Filitti. He's a senior counsel at the Lawfare Project, and retired General Daniel Karbler, former commander of the U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command, into the show now. Gentlemen, welcome here. Gerard, I'll start with you here. There sounds like 10 million, as I mentioned, Israelis sheltering in place, and the IDF saying that Iran is specifically targeting them.
The entirety of Israel is under a red alert for rocket launches right now, with the IDF accurately reporting that over 100 missiles have been launched by Iran. These were ballistic missiles, most of which have been intercepted or have fallen in unpopulated areas. So the initial wave seems to be over, although, of course, there's the potential for more missiles coming in, cruise missiles at lower altitude. So this is hardly over for Israelis tonight.
General Karbler, you are very familiar with the U.S. defense system and our allies. There are 43,000, 40,000, 3,000 additional going military troops in the region right now. What is happening amongst our military troops at this moment?
Yeah, so you saw that CENTCOM went ahead and brought in additional forces to include additional air defense forces. They are standing at the ready. I'm sure that we've shared plenty of intelligence with our Israeli counterparts as well in preparation for this attack. This did not come as a surprise. I know the Israelis were expecting it, which is why you had so many folks take shelter, as well as the air defense, the Israeli air defense forces ready to intercept all those missiles coming in.
Yeah, and General, I believe that it was U.S. intelligence that warned Israel that Iran was going to respond here. General, what do you make of Iran's statement here saying if Israel responds militarily, that they will have a harsh response here? Obviously, they're trying to fearmonger them.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a harsh response already to the Israeli attack earlier when they killed some of the leadership there. And so now 300 missiles coming in. It can't be overstated enough that the Israeli air defenses have now provided the Israeli leadership some decision space, keeping civilians protected, keeping some of those strategic assets protected. Again, they don't have to respond right away. They can give it some thought as to how they want to respond.
I also want to bring in, as part of this conversation, Inya Kravin. She is the Israel Program Director at the Nonpartisan Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Inya, welcome back to the show. Let me ask you this right now. The IDF has said that they unearthed a plan from Hezbollah. What they were planning another sort of October 7th attack. That's why they put boots on the ground in the first place, what has triggered Iran to respond here. What do you make of that unveiling of those plans?
So I'm not surprised to see those plans unveiled, since Hezbollah has been very public and very proud of the fact that they've been planning something similar to the October 7th attacks since of almost a decade. In fact, I think Hamas kind of scooped them on that one. Israel's been known for a long time that Hezbollah is a major threat, even a strategic threat. It has a huge arsenal of 150,000 rockets, or at least it did before this confrontation started. And so we're waiting now in Israel to see what the next wave will be. There's already been 2 waves of missiles coming in from Iran. Israel's known for a couple hours now that those are on the way. So folks like myself and my family have been sheltering pretty close to a bomb shelter. And then, as some of your other colleagues have said, about 25 minutes, an hour ago, the alert started saying sort of shelter in place. But the response that Iran is giving us now is not just from the ground invasion. It's also a debt that they feel are owed, a pound of flesh, if you will, for the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, which was believed to be carried out by Israelis. That's a Hamas leader. And he was killed under the nose of the regime in Tehran last month. And then, of course, just several days ago in Beirut, the leadership of Hezbollah, another Iran-backed proxy in the region, was decapitated in Beirut with a series of bombings that took out all of the top leadership. So Israel's been on the offense for the past few weeks, and this is Iran's response. And I can only imagine that Israel will retaliate in force to what is the largest attack Israel's ever seen. This is hundreds of missiles and rockets, ballistic missiles coming over from Iran. And I can only assume there's also some rockets in the mix from Hezbollah. I haven't seen that confirmed yet, but there's no reason that Hezbollah would want to sit this one out.
Gerard, let me ask you this. We have President Biden, who was asking for a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Obviously, this comes as there's been a huge stalemate in conversations between, for Hezbollah, there's been a stalemate between Hamas and Israel as well in a ceasefire deal. Are all ceasefire deals off the table at this point?
I think it's clear that ceasefire has been off the table for a while with Hamas. With respect to Hamas, there's been no interest on either side, but especially on Hamas in actually implementing a ceasefire. And when it comes to Hezbollah, it has been continuing assaults against northern Israel since October 8th of last year, showing no reluctance at all to continue these attacks and even planning ground incursions, which have been prevented. And now we see Israeli forces going in to prevent the possibility of more attacks. So there is little chance that there's a ceasefire on the table. I think what we're seeing is Israel achieving its military objectives of taking out the leadership of these Iran-based proxies, Iran-backed proxies rather, and Iran is in a position where it has to retaliate in some measure. This is why we're seeing missile launches. Iran has to justify to its proxies that it will do something to help them, when for the past year, Israel has been making steady advances in eradicating the leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah.
General, let me ask you this, because we saw how Israel responded to Iran's attacks back in April. They were small. How should they respond here? What kind of message does Israel and the U.S., for that matter, need to send to Iran tonight?
Yeah, that's why the air defenses gave the Israeli leadership some decision time. What Israel doesn't want to do is escalate this beyond what they would be able to handle militarily or politically. So they're going to have to take some very careful steps on what their response will be. It's got to be enough that it really puts Iran in its place and sends a strong message to Iran, but it can't be one that's going to escalate at such a level that this becomes something that kind of blows up throughout the entire Middle East.
I know, and that is definitely a concern here, that this wouldn't turn into a broader war. It feels like we're at a very untenable situation here. But General, how much time should there be between Israel responding in full and also trying to have a measured response here? Because at the end of the day, you want Iran to know they cannot continue to do this.
Yeah, so the Israeli leadership is going to do some battle damage assessment. They're going to see what exact effects and impacts the Iranian attack had, and that will go into their decision calculus for what the appropriate response will be. I hope that they limit it to military targets and significant military targets on the Iranian side.
And what do you make of Israel putting boots on the ground in Lebanon? Obviously, them saying it's very targeted, but this was seen as an escalation in this war.
Yeah, so that's a significant movement forward. Once you commit boots on the ground, the U.S. military knows that as well as anybody. You put boots on the ground, you have the chance that you're going to be there for a long while, and you've got to be able to support that, sustain that over a long period of time, or be prepared to be able to sustain and support that over a long period of time. And so I think any incursions, ground incursions, are going to be very targeted, very limited, have very specific objectives.
You know, there is two different political mindsets on how to handle this. Obviously, as I mentioned, we have President Biden, who would like to see a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah, which we heard Gerard say feels impossible at this point. And then you have Netanyahu, who says, no, it is time to take Hezbollah out once and for all. And as you well know, Hezbollah has a lot of blood on its hands, specifically 40 years ago, killing hundreds of U.S. military troops. And so at the end of the day, what kind of responsibility does the U.S. have in ultimately helping take out some of these, what is a terrorist organization?
Yeah, so Israel's always been a very special partner with the U.S., both politically, diplomatically, and militarily. So we'll continue to provide our support to Israel, particularly through our intelligence sources, as well as any kind of missile defense capability that we provide, and we have provided them in the past. Would be other options that we'd probably be exploring right now with the Israelis.
Enya, I want to bring you back in because you're on the ground there. What is the feeling of escalation amongst the Israeli people? Because obviously they're very used to something like this happening, bunkers everywhere. But this feels like the next level. Does it feel that way there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's unprecedented that almost every single Israeli is in the bomb shelter at the same time. Iran has capabilities unlike any of Israel's other adversaries. So seeing this escalate to a point where it might become all-out war is definitely a crescendo in what's been a year of steady buildup between Israel, Iran, and the Iranian proxies that surround Israel. So the mood is tense. I just got the alert on my phone. I'm in my bomb shelter right now with my family who's quietly sitting by. And I just got the alert that we can leave the bomb shelter, which may mean that there will not be a third wave, or at least there's not one anticipated in the coming minutes. So this might be it from the Iranian side. Or we might get an alert in a few minutes telling us to come back into the bomb shelter. So we're waiting to see. I would expect that there would be an Israeli response. And many Israelis, in the lead up to the salvos that were received in the past hour from Iran, many Israelis on social media and in Israeli media were asking, why is Israel allowing itself to be attacked? Why is there no preemptive attack here? Why is Israel not going in and trying to take out some of these capabilities before Iran shoots these ballistic missiles? Again, ballistic missiles, just to remind you, they're the size of a Greyhound bus. These are not the type of missiles that rockets that Israel's been getting from Gaza, which are damaging, which are dangerous, which are deadly. Ballistic missiles are the size of a Greyhound bus, and Iran, it sounds like from media, has just shot several hundred into Israel. Simultaneously, while Israel was waiting for this attack, there was a terror attack in Tel Aviv and Jaffa that killed 8 Israelis. And I'm hearing reports that there may have been another terror attack in Herzliya. So you have these terror groups that are taking advantage of the heightened threat from Iran and going out and wreaking havoc on the streets of Israel. This has been a multi-front war from the beginning, at least 7 fronts attacking Israel. And today it seems to have all come to a head, and we'll wait and see what Israel does next.
Let me ask you this, Enya, because many people do wonder what you're saying, why Israel hasn't done more to specifically go after Iran if they are the ones who are funding these proxy groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels. Why have they been going after the proxy groups instead of cutting off the head of the snake?
So that's a great question, and one that many have been asking Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, for the past year, and indeed for years before that. There has been an intentional campaign by the regime in Tehran to surround Israel with these proxies, to arm, fund, and train these proxies, and to set them loose at the Jewish state. And for many years, many experts have asked the government that maybe it's time to turn the tide. Maybe it's time to go after the head of the octopus. That was the way former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett framed it. So it looks like that this is now coming to a head. Israel has taken the gloves off. And a lot of this has to do with what's going on in DC. The Biden administration has been adamant that it does not want a regional escalation. A lot of that were, in concerns of leading up to the elections, that this could damage the Biden's chance of re-election, or in this case now his passing the torch to Vice President Harris. So the timing was just very inconvenient, and so the DC has put immense pressure on Israel to rein it in. But it looks like sometimes, war has a way of taking over the agenda, and that seems to be what have happened in the past week or so. So the question is can Israel now slow the roll, or is this on the path now to coming to a head finally and going after the head of the octopus in Tehran?
Wow. And I know that even this week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the Iranian head of state should be on notice. I think this is a question as well for many people, Enya, as we saw that Israel has the capability to take individuals out in Iran, as they did for Ismail Haniyeh, who was the head of Hamas. Obviously, now it's Yahya Sinwar. But why not be strategic in that way? Is that an option? I mean, that sounds very escalatory, but is that where this is headed?
So it's definitely an option, and the messaging that's come out of Jerusalem has been very specific in the past few days. You heard it from the head of the Israeli Air Force, you heard it from the head of the chief of staff of the IDF, and you heard it from Netanyahu, essentially saying that we will reach Israel's enemies everywhere. And if Israel had the type of intelligence that it had on Hezbollah, if it was able to place pagers on their bodies of these terrorists and have them explode simultaneously throughout Lebanon, there's little doubt that they're going to have similar capabilities in Tehran. And again, this is meant to deter Iran. This is to make Iran think twice before it goes and acts out as it did today against Israel. It looks like all of the threats, the veiled threats, the direct threats, the warnings to the Iranian regime were not taken seriously in Iran. And now you see the situation we're in. So to your point earlier, we have to see how this plays out. I'm sure that Washington is in deep consultations with Jerusalem right now. I heard that Biden was meeting with his cabinet. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is also in a bunker in Jerusalem in consultations with his cabinet. So we'll see how this dance plays out.
All right. And yeah, I'm glad that you are safe in your bunker there. Stay with us here. I hear that there are briefings underway at the State Department, at the White House, that we will pull up for you that are getting ready to go on. We'll go to them live when they are ready. You can see them getting ready at the White House and the State Department there for a briefing. I want to pull in Gerard Filitti back into this conversation here because I think it's important as the greatest ally to Israel, the U.S., what their response is here. As I said, we'll go to them live in a minute. What does the U.S. need to say specifically to Iran in these moments, Gerard?
The U.S. needs to be clear and unequivocal in its support for Israel and its condemnation of Iran's aggressions as violations of international law. The United States needs to make it clear that it will continue to arm and supply Israel for its defense and to take actions necessary to prevent this sort of hostility from escalating into a broader war. We have seen over the years, going back to what the general said before, Hezbollah was also responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American service members in Iraq and Syria in the early 2000s. We are dealing with the same challenges posed by these terrorist entities that Israel is. And what the United States needs to make clear is our commitment to maintaining peace in that region by making sure that terrorists can no longer have a stranglehold on any country in the region and can no longer carry out these attacks. So the U.S. message to Iran needs to be clear that there are and will be consequences for its warmongering, that it will not be supported by the international community, that we will impose sanctions and heighten military pressure on Iran to prevent increased aggression in the region.
And obviously, we have so much military in the region right now. As we're talking about with General Karbler, 43,000 military troops right now. Gerard, I want you to stay with us, but I want to go now to Josh Haston. He is one of our reporters who is live in Judea there on the ground. Josh, do we have you?
Success.ringcentral.
Okay, it sounds like we're calling him in there, but he is live there. Until we get him, Gerard, I'll bring you back in here. But at the end of the day, do you think that President Biden needs to leave the ceasefire concept behind, or do you expect that we'll hear that from the White House still?
I think we will still hear language about the need for peace and a ceasefire, but I think ultimately that language needs to be left behind. There's also a realistic constraint that Joe Biden will only be in power in the United States for another few months. We still don't know the outcome of the presidential election, and that will have a significant bearing on how Israel proceeds with both its foreign policy and its defense. Many people believe, and I think this is shared widely within the Israeli government, that a Kamala Harris administration would be less favorable to Israel's use of force than the Biden administration has been or than a Trump administration would be. So there is a lot of pressure on Israel to conduct right now the operations it believes are necessary for its defense because of these political considerations coming out of the United States as well.
Yeah, and obviously Kamala Harris says she will fully support Israel, but there is concern about what that may look like. And we have former President Trump who says that he would end this war quickly, as well as the one in Ukraine. So very different stances on how they would handle foreign policy here. I believe that we do have Josh Haston with us now, who is live in Judea. Do we have Josh with us now? Not yet. Okay, we're going to try to get him. Let me pull back in Inya, who's there with us. And Inya, are you still with us?
I'm here.
Talk to me about, you said that they said that you could get out of your bunker now. How reliable is that for the Israeli people there? Are they trusting of that? Like you said, there might be a third wave here. How concerned are people?
So just like me, everyone's watching their phones. In the interim, I let my family out of the safe room, so they're my kids are hopefully going off to bed now. But there is a high trust in the IDF. I mean, like I said, we just had potentially several hundred rockets come in from Iran and other places maybe, and then I get the all safe from on my phone from the alert from the national sort of emergency services, and I send my kids off to bed. So there is a high level of trust in the IDF. I think that is really what keeps this country moving. And now that the attack seems over, at least for now, Israelis will get on with their day. Tomorrow is the Jewish New Year, so a lot of people are making preparations for that. And Israelis have a motto of not letting terrorists interfere with the way of life here, and life must go on.
Wow. I do want to say that we have breaking news now. Just moments ago, the IDF says that they have killed another senior Hezbollah operative in an airstrike on an apartment building on the edge of Beirut. Obviously, this says they have boots on the ground in Lebanon. The Israeli military says that Mohammed Jafar Kassir was killed in an airstrike this afternoon. I want to bring in my colleague, Kris Gutierrez, with us, and I want to also bring in General Karbler to respond to this killing of this additional Israeli military general here. Obviously, General, Israel is making strides on the ground here and still trying to take out key Hezbollah commanders and leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was said earlier before, you want to cut the snake off at the head. So the more you can dismantle the senior leadership and the senior command and control apparatus, the foot soldiers then they really don't have any ability to act on orders. And the hopes are then you start to dismantle and disaggregate the lower echelons of Hezbollah activities that could take place against Israel. You'll still have pockets, but it'll be the ability for those Hezbollah attacks to be coordinated from above is significantly degraded.
General Karbler, Kris Gutierrez here now. Before I got on air, I was monitoring what's going on behind the scenes, and Iranian officials have, according to the UN, put out a statement trying to justify their actions today with these two strikes, and they're also claiming that they are done, that the two wave of strikes is all that they plan. And excuse me if we knew this information already, I'm just jumping on air. The IDF at the same time says that 10 million civilians were targeted by the Iranian projectiles. Talk to us about the response here. What do you anticipate? What can we expect? And how does the U.S. potentially be involved here?
Yeah, I want to go back to I think that the U.S. Statements that come out first off have to be adamant that every country has a right to self-defense. And when you're attacked with 300 ballistic missiles, every country has a right to self-defense and has a right to respond back. So that'd be the first statement out of the U.S. Then I would like to hear the U.S. talk about that all U.S. forces throughout the Middle East region, they also are ready to defend themselves. And any attack on U.S. forces broader throughout the Middle East region will incur a response from the U.S. So I think a good, strong statement like that from the U.S. helps bolster any responses that Israel will have, as it has a right to self-defense and respond to attacks into its country.
At this point, Israeli officials are saying that they have no casualties to report. We don't know the extent of any damage, obviously, in that region. It's what, 8:45 in Tel Aviv at this hour, p.m. What would you expect to see come daylight? And the idea that there are no casualties at this point, knowing that 10 million civilians were potentially targeted. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, first, if that remains true, and you know, battle damage assessment is not something you just snap your fingers and you know, get that information in the first 5 to 10 minutes. So it'll take a little bit of time to get the full assessment for the damage on the ground and any casualties, whether wounded or killed in action. But hats off to the Israeli Air Defense Forces for providing that kind of protection, that level of protection, that at least at initial, the initial glimpses, looks like we've prevented any significant casualties or any casualties at all. And that goes back to my earlier comment that now the Israeli leadership, they've got some decision space. They've got some time to make good decisions about what they want to target, when they want to target, and how they want to hit those targets. Had there been huge catastrophic losses of life, the call for the Israeli leadership to respond immediately would have been much louder. But now they can be a little bit more. They can take a little bit of time again on developing those targets and how they're going to strike and when they're going to strike.